Making campaigns last is kind of my thing. Since 2021, I've brought 12 campaigns from level 1 to level 20, and that's because I know how to make platypus plots. Most DMs naturally create platypus plots to some degree, but few do it intentionally, know that they're doing it, or why, which is what you'll learn by the end of this video. Homie and the Dude's latest Kickstarter, Scorched Basin, also includes a mechanic that is somewhat akin to the platypus method, though I don't think they've heard of it before now. They're also today's sponsor, but I'll tell you more about that in a minute. My name is Timothy, though some people do call me Tim, and I'm originally from Tasmania, Australia, though I know that my accent hides pretty well. And we have some of the biggest platypuses there. Yes, it's platypuses, not platypi. They're crazy creatures. Bill of a duck, fur that glows under UV light. They sense the electrical currents of the movements of their prey. And the boys have a venomous spur with an individualized neurotoxin that pain meds can't touch. Oh, and this is their closest relative. Yeah, they're weird. The joke has always been that when God was done creating the animals, he had a few spare parts left over and bam, platypus. Which is the origin of the platypus method of making plots. It's about piecing elements together into something more than their parts. Just like the vehicle building system included in Scorched Basin. Inspired by Mad Max meets Dune, it's no wonder that Homie and the Dude, who already have a successful airship building system from their previous Kickstarter, are doing what Descent into Avernus failed to do. Making fantasy vehicle combat cool. Including robust rules for vehicle-on-vehicle combat, and heaps of customization options. Scorched Basin will continue off of Sky Zephyrs and bring the craziness down to the sands. Access to their builder app takes all of the guesswork out of different builds and saves you on doing the math too. Just pick the craziest components you can come up with and drive out into the sands to see how it fares. If the idea of building custom death machines out of the scrap of your enemy's rigs fills you with glee, then check out Scorched Basin now. In my previous plot video, I got a lot of push from people saying that D&D is best with no plots, which I think is nonsense, but maybe it's a matter of definitions. A simple definition of plot is the sequence of events in a story. So saying D&D is best without plot is saying that D&D is best without a story, which I don't think is what anybody was trying to say. What I think is really going on is a vocal desire for players to have agency, which they totally should, and to let players choose the direction of the story, which they also should. But the two are not mutually exclusive. The moment you tell a group that a village is in danger, offer them a quest, or suggest that there's a monster out there, you've already created a plot, or at least the beginnings of one. That doesn't mean that your players have to jump at the opportunity. Just because something is a plot hook doesn't mean that it has to be a railroad. For instance, let's say that we introduce a plot where somebody barges into your home and conscripts you to go rob a dragon. The opening chapters of The Hobbit might sound familiar there. But what happens next? Maybe in your version of The Hobbit, you spend some time hiring mercenaries that are going to charge in from the front and distract the dragon while you rob it and sneak out the back, hoping that everybody dies so that you don't have to pay them. At least one of my groups would probably go this route. It would still be a cool adventure, even though it's not the same story that we know and love. A group might even choose not to take the hook and just leave it dangling. The platypus method is how we bridge the gap between honoring player agency and planning an adventure that your players will be excited to be a part of. Because while the 3-plot method requires a lot of initial planning, the platypus method is more reactive and repetitive. It's something that you commonly do right after session 0 and then frequently again throughout the campaign. It actually combines really well with the 3-plot campaign in order to create vital C-plots that are going to tie back to the rest of the story. But it also helps you to create standalone adventures that will catch your players' interest. To do so, you just have to pay attention to the hooks that your players have chosen to bite. And then you spend a few minutes tying together a number of these hooks into your next story. Essentially, you use these valuable leftover pieces as building blocks and inspirations for your next plot hook, thus creating a platypus. And different pieces that are left lying around in your stories have different values. They can include the premise for your game, individual adventures that your party has completed or that you want to run, world lore that your party has shown interest in, and hooks already built into players' backstories. And unfortunately, your world building and lore, it's usually at the bottom of the list. It's like UV fur. It's interesting, but not terribly useful, unless a player has actively shown interest in a specific piece of that world lore. Then maybe it's a flipper. So keeping track of what lore your party has not only collected but has shown interest in is a valuable tool for creating good platypus plots. Meanwhile, that neurotoxin stinger, that's the hooks lying around in a player's backstory. Because ultimately, players aren't really there to tell your story, they're there to tell their story. So anything that ties back to the story that they have created is naturally more exciting and intriguing. Of course, some players will have more of an attachment to their backstories than others, but usually once they realize that a given plot is about them in some fashion, most players are pretty eager to dive into the action. Similarly, the premise of the game, or the A-plot in a 3-plot method campaign, is a solid hook because it comes with an inherent bias. Hopefully, you haven't kept the main story a secret from your players, and so they've already agreed to tell that story when they agreed to play that game. Essentially, they've already agreed to chase the hooks that are related to that story. So tying your individual adventures back into the main story is an easy way to get attention and interest. Finally, individual adventures that have already been chosen, stories that have already been told, often leave parts dangling around waiting to be picked up. Mysteries that didn't get answered, bad guys that got away, friends that were made. Anything that didn't resolve out fully and completely can be fuel for a platypus plot to rope the group's interest back in. And if you haven't run an adventure but are interested in doing so, perhaps because you picked up one of WotC's anthology books, or you have a one-shot off of DM's Guild, or of your own design, then you can mine that story for hooks that might work well with other pieces that are already there in order to get the chance to run it. Just make sure you don't force it down people's throats. Individually, each of these components can be a useful hook to gather your party members' interest. The trick to a good platypus plot, however, is to combine these pieces together before you dangle them in front of your players. By tying stories back to the main premise of the game, you encourage the main plot to continue. You add greater value to those stories by weaving in players' backstories, creating personal investment. Meanwhile, linking in seemingly unrelated events into the story makes all of it seem more important. And when you throw in some interesting lore, it just sweetens the pot. If you're struggling for player engagement, mine their backstories for loose ends. Look back on the adventures that they've already gone on with you. Think about the premise of the game that you've already sold them on, and write everything down. Then set a 10-minute timer and connect as many of these together into new stories that you and your players can tell. Those stories are your platypus plots. And then you can dangle those in front of your players to see which ones get them the most excited. Speaking of, what gets you excited? What kind of content would you like to see more of here on the channel? Drop me a line in the comments, and don't forget to check out the Scorched Basin Kickstarter while there's still a chance to get some sweet perks from an early pledge. In the meantime, here's some time with my cats.